Hello everybody, welcome to What Culture Gaming. I'm Scott, I'm joined by Josh.
Hi Scott.
Hi!
It's been an interesting morning, hasn't it?
It has, but I don't know what order these videos are going up in, but there is something coming very soon where we had to do a very disgusting thing, but you'll have to wait and find out. I think it'll be towards the end of the week. Anyway, let's talk about Far Cry 5, because a lot of media outlets have been covering this recently because way more hands-on footage has started to come out, and a lot of outlets have been able to play a good few hours of it. I think it was at a specific press event, because we haven't done any of it.
No, it was a press event in Paris, I think.
Oh, it's a bit far,
isn't
isn't it, to be honest?
It is, isn't it?
So we didn't go there, but basically the thing that I want to talk about is the emerging sort of twist on the narrative that Far Cry 5 has, I don't know, over the course of the last couple of years become this like thing, this game that's going to like tackle Trump or tackle like modern America, and how I really don't think that's the case, and I think it's quite easy to prove that that's not the case, and I think it's worthwhile having that discussion because a lot of people seem to be gearing up for Far Cry 5 to be this like, I don't know, this big like killing Trump fan simulator thing. And it just isn't that.
No.
So you've been tackling the gameplay side. You've been reading a lot about gameplay details and stuff. And I've been going into comments from Dan Hay, which is the creative director, and the guy that plays Joseph Seed, which is the big guy you've probably seen in the trailers, the big crazy gun-toted man, or is he crazy? Yes, he's
father.
crazy. He's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
He's the man who leads the Eden's Gate cult. He's called Joseph Seed. He's played by Greg Brick. And talking, he's been doing a bunch of interviews as well as to like, look, how much was this performance influenced by modern America or like the Trump campaign and things like that. And the basic response is no, it was not at all. And the general inspiration for Far Cry 5 came from 80s Cold War mentalities in America. And this Dan Hay guy talked about how he noticed lots of Americans were getting lost in like consumerism and like buying lots of stuff up. There was a general feeling that, you know, nuclear war or some sort of war was going to break out, and how that influenced, like fear influenced communities and the way people came together. And that was the main inspiration. Have you found any of that in the gameplay stuff?
Well, apparently in the gameplay stuff, there's the religious iconography and stuff is still there, but apparently it's just sort of background dressing, like window dressing. It's not really directly addressing the plot. So the biggest thing they've taken away is essentially it's just another Far Cry game. What they've enjoyed the most is barreling through Montana on a quad bike rather than getting into this like political stuff.
Right.
Because apparently after the opening, when you get the father's Joseph Seed? Joseph Seed's like motivation stuff, you get a brief hint towards his like political beliefs. He's scared about like the government taking his guns away and stuff, but apparently that's where it ends, and then after that it's just Far Cry open world fare. Because
one of the things to really take home with this is that creative director Dan Hay, his last game was Far Cry 4, which ended in obviously released in 2014 or 15. Regardless, his work on the project was done as of 2014, so we can assume that he's been working on Far Cry 5 for that long. And also the interviews with Greg Brick, like he talks about how Joseph Seed is like this family man who loses everything, and how that makes him turn to religion, and then he believes he's had this encounter with God that tells him to like rally all the people together and try and save them because there's some sort of post-apocalypse that's going to come or whatever, and that's why he's more like over the top and ridiculous. But the main message for Far Cry 5 seems to be tapping into the like really older mentalities that are at the heart of America, whether you take them to be stereotypical Southern Americans, like things that we saw in like Deliverance, or the archetypal like Southern American hick guy or whatever. Like it seems to be taking that and running with it, the same way that something like Far Cry 4 was sort of this like kind of a little way of a look into like Kim Jong-un or like that kind of thing, paralleling that to like North and South Kairat and Pagan Min, and the whole idea of like a dictatorial rule that sometimes benefits sometimes can benefit certain systems of the community based on like structural things like roads or whatever, it was kind of an exploration.
Let's face it, this narrative about like an extreme religious cult bearing arms and going a bit nutty isn't exactly new to video games or movies. Like,
nope.
We were talking before we started recording about Red State, the Kevin Smith movie, which is essentially the same plot as this.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not, by the sounds of it, it's not anything new. Like, they're not crowbarring any sort of Trump politics or anything into it. It's just a narrative that we've seen quite a lot done in video game form, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's like, it's one of those things where again Greg Brick was saying that like, look, a lot of people are going to project a lot of narrative. I should clarify, this interview is with GameSpot, it's a very new interview, but he's saying that a lot of people are going to project a lot of narratives onto the game, but he sees it more as a conversation piece. He flat out said no when asked if anything sort of modern relates to the way he portrayed the character. And one of the game's final scenes, he was actually filming it during the Montana the forest fires and stuff, so he was having that behind him, and he was like, that connoted the whole post-apocalypse thing, and he channeled that into the performance. Again, nothing to do with like the Trump or modern sort of left-right ideologies or whatever. I just think it's worth pointing that out, because like a lot of like write-ups that I'm seeing, whether it's on like Waypoint or Kotaku or GameSpot, seem to be like delving into like, oh, like what is it doing? How is it tackling like modern mentalities?
Yeah.
And the reality of that is the game's been in development for too long to even go anywhere near them. Like it's not inspired by them. There's going to be parallels because it's dealing with issues at the heart of America, but those mentalities are the ones that are on show right now because they are so overblown. Yeah, okay, because of Trump. But again, the game, it's just not the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's worth like picking apart.
Obviously, yeah, that's like the big thing for me because, like you said, you know, this game has been in development for years, and as was Wolfenstein 2, which I think is a good parallel to this because that, in its marketing, leaned heavily into the controversy and sort of leaned more into like that the Trump politics and stuff. Whereas this has gone the opposite direction. It's touching on like, you know, similar things that are quite salient at the moment, but it's sort of taking a step back and being like, no, hang on, this is not about anything directly today, whereas Wolfenstein 2 didn't have it in the plot because, again, that was in development really early on, but that leaned into it more in its marketing.
Definitely. Well, there was that whole thing, it was the whole, like, I think it was GTFO Nazis, and it showed, like, someone being punched, like, obviously there's parallels to, like, Richard Spencer or whatever in real life. But, yeah, I mean, one of the things that I sort of, like, assumed that was that Far Cry 5 had been delayed because of the general sort of, like, fractionated mentalities in America. But things aren't getting any better, and it's like, and especially with like the level of gun crime or whatever, it doesn't seem like there's an ideal time to release Far Cry 5. Regardless of when they drop it, it's going to have all these parallels. You know, to some degree, some of them are intentional based on the themes that it's going towards, and some of them are just going to be overblown. But already the general reactions to the hands-on time seem to be like, this isn't doing what we thought it was going to do. And I would just say, go back and watch the original trailer, go back and look at how ridiculous it's always handled itself. Parallel that to how Far Cry 5 tried to shine a light onto like, you know, like Far Eastern mentalities and that kind of thing, and pull them out the same way. Like Greg Brick said, you can project mentalities onto it if you want, but I don't think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think if you take something away from it, that's cool.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're trying to do.
So a big thing that keeps popping up in like the previews is that the enemies are essentially, despite having all this like religious iconography to them and being part of this plot, are essentially as nondescript as the pirates were in Far Cry 3.
Yes.
That's what I keep seeing over and over again. So I mean,
I mean, that taps into the whole thing with like what Far Cry is. The reason that it got so big after 3 was because it started being more crazy. Like Vass, you know, like what's the definition of insanity? And like he was ostensibly just a mirror to the player. Like there was all the plot, that there was a lot of theories as to like, oh, is Vass you, and is he even real, and whatever. But like Far Cry kind of has to trade in this like heightened, more ridiculous sort of tone. In a way, I think that can work to its favor. I quite like the juxtaposition of occasionally going like, all this stuff is ridiculous, all this stuff is over the top. But then as a player, you go like, that resonates a little bit, and I can see that it's not intentional, but maybe that makes me think of something in a different way. I just think it's integral to maintain the intent of the developers and the stuff that they were trying to do, regardless of the time that it releases in. That to me is like the most important thing. Because I mean, look, there's a giant bear called Cheeseburger in
yes,
this.
there is.
So it's like, it's not like Far Cry's not being Far Cry. Again, that could derail any potentially serious messages, but we'll see. I don't think it's potentially going for seriousness anyway. If you take that away, then cool. The only other thing that's worth saying is that in the interview with GameSpot, Greg Brick talks about how the narrative is going to be very, you know, intense and whatever. And he said the way that it ends, he said you might even find yourself coming around to the Eden's Gate message, and it sort of hints to like maybe there'll be a choice.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Wouldn't be new for the series. I mean, you've done that before.
Not at all. And like, yeah, that was the whole thing in Far Cry 3, whether you decide to go with Citra or not. And maybe that'll be a thing. Obviously, in these politically charged times, deciding to go with some hyper-right mentality is something that's going to divide people going forward. But regardless of anything, you guys can let us know what you think down in the comments. Far Cry 5 isn't coming until the end of the month, and already it's very politically charged, whether it wants to be or not. I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you soon.